welcome back to another episode of Whisky Diaries. My name is Mark Lang. We're here at Death and Taxes, and today we're going to be talking about this beautiful whiskey, Redbreast 21-year-old, considered one of the best whiskies in the world, and rightly so. It's an absolutely stunning. A little bit of history on Redbreast. Originally was owned by Gilbey's in the mid 1800s. Gilbey's was like what a lot of the shops were at that time, was basically just a wine merchant and a distiller. At one stage, they were carrying about 300,000 litres of bonded whiskey in their warehouses. Now, bonded whiskey means that basically because they were one merchant, they had so many barrels of Finos and Oloroso sherries and wines in itself that were empty. They were buying a lot of the whiskey and just putting it in the barrel to age by themselves, and then bottling on their own labels. Now, this whiskey was usually bought from the Jamieson's distillery at the time. So the original bottle was actually, and a similar bottle like this, the original bottle that the Gilbey's were doing were called JJ Liqueur. Redbreast just started to being mentioned in the early 1912 was the first reference to Redbreast, and the reason why is because the chairman of Gilbey's at the time used to love bird watching, and his favorite bird was the redbreast, hence the logo on the bottle as well, which is like a little redbreast bird. Now, around 1960s, Irish distilleries decided to stop supplying any merchants anymore, but Redbreast actually, or Gilbey's at the time, finally convinced them to keep supplying to them because the brand would disappear. Now, in the early 1980s, Gilbey's decided to stop the production of Redbreast, so Irish distillery decided to buy it from them. So for a couple of years, they redesigned the bottle and all that stuff, and it didn't get released till the early 1990s. At that time, the only release that they had was the Redbreast 12 years old and the 15. Now later on, they added the 15 cask strength, the 12 cask strength, and the 21 and the 25. And lately, a couple of years ago, they released that 27-year-old, which we have all reviewed. Also, there is the Lustau release as well. That is a special sherry cask. Now, going back to the 21-year-old and most of Redbreast as well, it's an absolutely one of my favorite whiskies, and Irish whiskey, definitely my favorite. It's an actually stunning of a whiskey. They don't spare any on quality or anything like that. So it's a single pot still whiskey, which means in Irish, and the Irish law means that basically it's the equivalent of a single malt in Scotland. It comes from a single distillery and basically bottled at the distillery and using pot stills only. This is a mix between unmalted and malted barley, and basically 3 times distilled on the pot stills. 46% ABV is basically across the board, except for the 25 that is actually cask strength. None of them are non-chill filtered. For those who don't know what non-chill filter is, it's a way of removing impurities from the whiskey. So when you put ice, it doesn't kind of like go cloudy. Back in the 80s, people thought that the whiskey going cloudy means that the whiskey was off, but it's basically the oils in the whiskey that basically concentrate through the coldness of the ice. Now, people like connoisseurs and people that are fanatic about whiskey, they believe that if you chill filter a whiskey, it takes away a lot of the character of the whiskey. I have done many blind tastings between both of them, and I can't taste the difference, but from a Puritan perspective, it is better not to be non-chill filtered, so they don't take any flavors out of the whiskey. So these ones as well. So the 21-year-old, following the rest of the whiskies as well, is basically half an American oak and half an Oloroso sherries. They have a really good cask program, which makes them being able to source the best casks that they can from Oloroso factories. Oloroso wine producers around Spain, similar to what Macallan or Glenronach do. They have really good contacts. They've been using Oloroso sherry for so many years that they have really good contacts and stuff, and they can get their hand picks on what Oloroso sherry casks they can. And that's really important, because the quality of the barrel basically is going to give the flavor to the whiskey itself. Awesome. Well, without further ado, let's try this whiskey. As I always say, 46% ABV is my favorite mark for tasting a whiskey. I think it's just right there before, getting too strong, like getting closer to 50, and too weak, getting closer to the 40s. It's a really, really good, for me personally. As I always say as well, when tasting a whiskey is very subjective, so whatever flavors, if you're trying this whiskey with us, whatever flavors you find could be very different. But Redbreast in itself is actually very famous for like lots of apricots and a lot of fruity notes. Obviously you get a lot of the spiciness from the sherry casks, and yeah, I can definitely smell peach as well. And yeah, that's absolutely super complex and delicious. You get that backbone of what you will get from an Irish whiskey, which is, I always find it like it's kind of like almost like a maple syrup or caramel kind of flavor at the back, but also with the complexity of all the sherry notes that you would get from like the dry apricots, the spices, the raisins and forest fruits and all that sort of stuff. And it's actually one of the most awarded Irish whiskey as well. So it's definitely worth having. Not sure how much it's going for at the moment, but if you can get your hands on one bottle, I would definitely spend the money, because it's one of those whiskey that you open for a special occasion or to celebrate with someone. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed that session, guys, and we'll see you next time. Slán